Astra by Arthur J. Burks, narrated by Mike Vendetti. Mary Hale opened her eyes slowly, knowing that the terror was with her again. It dribbled out of her hair in beads of sweat. Though the time was winter and the big house always cold at night, cold sweat made her feel as if all her taut body were a bleeding wound. She was instantly aware that Fred, behind her as she lay on her side, was awake, waiting perhaps for her to tell him again. In her dream, which couldn't possibly be a dream, and produced such definitely visible, fearsome results, she preferred another man to her husband. Had she ever blurted it out while she slept? Didn't Fred behave strangely toward her? Hadn't he begun eyeing her with questions in his expression since the first of the... No, she simply couldn't call them dreams. Astral traveling. She simply couldn't believe in such nonsense. She could, of course, be going mad. She turned to her husband, bursting into tearing sobs as his ready arms came about her, drawing her close. Again, baby. Yes, softly. Yes, Fred. And when we go down to the kitchen, Fred, am I going mad? Of course not, beloved. It isn't anything, not really. That is, nothing we can't handle. What was it this time? Shopping. I went shopping in a darkened store after midnight. In fact, Fred, I just returned. It's 10 minutes from here to the store. And if you just came back, I can testify that you haven't left this bed since you tucked yourself in beside me last night. Well, then, this time I did something, Fred. I've tried things before, but nothing ever came of it. This time I put one of my calling cards under a can of kennel ration, well back in the shelf, so that it wouldn't likely be found right away. If we go there before the store opens... We'll do it, baby, said Fred Hale. Now, what did you buy last night or so early this morning? Should she, here and now, safe in his arms, tell him about George Bennett, who made her forget her husband completely the instant he walked into her dream? Astral travel, whatever it was. Awake, she knew no George Bennett, nor could she find him in any Lancaster, Lenox, Columbia, Everett, Elizabethtown, Marietta telephone book. He wasn't therefore real, yet his presents were. At least up until now, they always had been. I bought 3 pounds of coffee because it's cheaper, said Mary Hale. Fred turned on the light, took down what she told him. I bought a head of cabbage, a bag of Idaho potatoes, 5 pounds of sugar, 3 cans of evaporated milk, 2 cans of dog food, our usual 3 cans of cat food, again our usual kind, 4 packages of frozen mixed vegetables, 2 pounds of sweet potatoes, 3 bunches of carrots, a bag of spinach, 40 cents worth of bananas. Altogether, it came to $5.12. And you paid cash? Yes, I had to. It's an A&P store, That's one thing that gets me, said Fred slowly. You always pay cash for this stuff. You get somehow in the night. But no cash is ever missing from either your purse or mine. And all these stores, all through the neighborhood, which report eerie nocturnal visitations, with unexplained cash rung up on their cash registers, and the cash in the dampers to match, and nothing stolen. Report exactly the sum total you always tell me. Where does the money come from? Dare she tell her adored but incredibly jealous husband that George Bennett always paid the bills, He was looking at her strangely now, preparing to answer himself somehow. "Baby, in your dreams, where does the money come from?" She would have been caught flatly if she hadn't been expecting the question. "That's the mystery," she said. "I always know then, but never know here. I just know that the bill is always paid in cash and rung up on the cash register." "Maybe," said Fred softly, "there's something you're not telling?" "Fred!" "No need to disturb yourself about it." "Is there?" he asked. She was flustered, of course. Who wouldn't have been? For in the dream or astral journey, whatever it was, George Bennett wasn't her husband. He was something just as intimate, though. Half of a relationship that the world frowned or affected to frown upon. Yet that part of her weird life with George Bennett was only implied. No slightest part of it came into her nightly experience. To be remembered, anyway. "Well," Fred was saying, "which basket did you use?" "I apparently forgot to take a market basket," she answered quickly. "So I selected a box." "What was in the box?" It had held, according to the legend outside, evaporated milk. Together they rose, noted the time, 2 a.m., and walked downstairs to the kitchen table. Atop the kitchen table was a fiber box, on the outside of which was splashed the name of a popular brand of evaporated milk. Inside the box, a careful check indicated exactly the items Mary Hale had enumerated for Fred Hale on waking just prior to 2 a.m. Mary was an exquisite woman of 25. In her nightgown she was exquisite plus, even when, as now, her cheeks were definitely pale. "They weren't here when we went to bed," she said flatly. "No. And I wasn't out of bed. No." Even the sales slip, showing a total of $5.12, was tucked in among the mysterious items. Only there was nothing mysterious about the items. They were real. The Hale family would eat everything here except the cat and dog food. "The doors were all locked," said Mary dully. "All locked. Fred, let's sell out. Let's go far, far away from here. Unless you think, as I'm beginning to, I'm going mad." "We can't run away," said Fred Hale. "Nobody ever runs away from the feared successfully. Besides, my business is here." "But for me, Fred, you love me, don't you? I'm more important to you than your business." "Darling, you are all my life, everything I want, am, hope to have or be. But don't you see that we have to fight this thing out, right here where it started?" "But none of it is possible, no matter what outlandish stuff one might believe in." "No, it isn't possible. But take a gander at that box of stuff from the A&P. That's real, baby. And if we find your calling card this morning—" "And when it began, the necklace was real," whispered Mary. "So were the 3 dozen stockings, and 6 pairs of shoes that just fitted me. So were the dresses for each social occasion, the coats, jackets, ensembles, for a total of $1,147 to date, and 39 cents. And none of it came out of my pocketbook or bank account, nor out of yours." They were back in bed with the alarm clock wound and set to waken them, in time to drive the 10 miles to the big store and hunt for the calling card, when Mary remembered something and just managed to forbear gasping, just before she wakened, perspiring in terror. George Bennett had said, almost casually, "I'm coming to wherever you spend your days and take you away. I'm coming sometime today. You might as well get set. Will you come with me, Mary?" "I'll come, of course, George. You know that. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth." "If you knew where the ends are," he had smiled at her, "you wouldn't wonder nearly so much. What all this nocturnal prowling means, if people just knew how active they are in what they call dreams, if they had the remotest notion of what dreams are intended to hide, a vast lot of time in human life would be conserved. Well, it is conserved now, but the dreaming sleepers would know it." Of course, she could never tell Fred any of that. Just before they slept, they checked on all the other stuff that had weirdly materialized after one of Mary's dreams. Rather the total that all her scavenging dreams added up to. They still bore the price tags. Mary had been afraid to wear them, lest someone from wherever she had got each item, and George had paid for it, should recognize it and start yelling, "Thief! Thief!" She hadn't stolen anything, but surely she and George Bennett had broken and entered. But had they? Well, the strange facts of cash in cash registers had been reported to police and eventually had got into the newspapers, so that a public avid for mysteries awaited each new and brief report with eagerness. No breaking and entering report had been given to the police or the newspapers. It was presumed that the prowler or prowlers possessed keys. Mary Hale and George had returned at least 3 times to 3 scenes of their crimes, while policemen stood guard at all locked entrances and exits. But no policeman, though each one had been tremendously chagrined, had seen anything unusual, or heard anybody or anything. The newspapers had built up quite a case of negligence against the local police in Lancaster and several neighboring cities. Madame Blavatsky could have explained it, perhaps, said one imaginative reporter. She knew how to make earth spirits, kobolds, leprechauns, gremlins, pixies, catch and carry for her. It looked like an instantaneous transmission of material items. Nothing else seems to explain the cash in the registers, exactly totaling missing goods. In some instances, in other instances, it couldn't have been checked, but may have been merely paid for goods taken mysteriously in the night. When the store opened, Mary Hale and her husband were the first inside. Mary led the way to the cattle ration section, looked swiftly around to make sure she wasn't observed, and came up with a calling card. By the time Mary and Fred reached home again, Mary was fit to be tied. She didn't believe in gremlins or kobolds or leprechauns. Inside her own home, Mary had hysterics. No telling where it might have ended had not Fred broken out at last. "Darling, I might as well confess. It's been a gag, understand? I got all this stuff at the different places and planted it. I hoped I'd never have to tell you, but I thought I was in love for a little while with a woman named Georgia Bennett. I thought if I pulled a bit of stuff on you and sent you off your rocker, maybe I could get a divorce." Mary stared at Fred in horror, her mouth hanging open. "But, Fred, I've always told you the details of my dreams just before we found the stuff. I dreamed I bought. You couldn't have." Then it struck her. Georgia Bennett. Could she even ask a question about Georgia without telling something about George? The doorbell chimed. Fred went to answer, returned almost at once with a queer expression on his face. "Man to see you, Mary," he said. "It's a damnedest coincidence." "Coincidence, Fred?" she heard herself asking. "Yes, his name seems to be George Bennett." Fred trailed Mary as his wife, marching as if to a guillotine, went to the door, opened, looked out into the smiling face of the man of her dreams, every last one of her dreams, her prowling dreams. "George," she managed. "Bennett," he snapped briskly, scarcely friendly at all. "Look, sister, this bill has been running long enough. $1,147.39. I never expected to have to spend so much money to get such a little way with any woman. I've come for either the money or the stuff." "Then you're not here for... that is, you didn't come to take..." "The stuff? Yes, I did. If you don't pay up..." "Mr. Bennett," said Mary, vast relief bubbling up in her, "is your wife's name Georgia?" "Got no wife. That's my sister's name. She lives in California, not married either. Why?" "Never mind. And say, you can take back all that stuff, even yesterday's vegetables and canned goods. Fred, if you'll just fetch it..." "Never mind, Fred," said George Bennett. "My men'll get the things." No sooner had George Bennett spoken than every last one of the dream-propelled items piled themselves on the porch at his feet. Mary gasped. Fred Hale gasped too. George Bennett checked the items against his list, nodded. "Oh, it seems to be here," he said. "Now, take it out to the car." Instantly, the stuff was gone. George Bennett grinned. "Gremlins today, leprechauns yesterday, cabalids tomorrow," he said, thumping the brim of his hat. "Want to go to my car and check?" "Don't need to," said Fred. "There are garments on hangers in the tonneau now. There weren't any a second or two ago. No doors open, no windows. How was it done?" "I just told you. Well, so long." "Before you go," said Fred, "what's the sense of all this? What were you trying to prove? Why did you tell your wife you had thought yourself in love with Georgia Bennett when she was out in California and has been for years?" "Maybe," said Mary, looking queerly at Fred, "he's been dreaming true, too." "Dream?" said George. "Nobody dreams. Everybody thinks he dreams. What actually happens is this." George was gone in a flash. Next instant, he stuck his head out the window of his car, clear across the highway, and yelled, "I almost forgot, Mary. I came for you. You coming?" Instantly, as if there were no need to think about it, and just as she was, Mary started running toward George. She hadn't taken 2 steps before she found herself sitting beside him, quite comfortably, too. As the car started smoothly away, she was aware of all the small voices all around them, in the car, under it, on the roof, blending in what sounded like a single small, very small voice which said, "If more people knew how much fun it is, a lot more would be going for it." Mary Hale laughed happily, and George Bennett grinned at her. "There'll be no more daydreaming, Mary. Understand?" This has been Astra by Arthur J. Burks, narrated by Mike Vendetti. Production copyright 2024 by Mike Vendetti Productions. www.mikevendetti.com